Hello, my name is Robert Hall. I do not speak for the NRA. I believe I speak for at least some people who are wearing yellow shirts out there because I compete with them. And I heard testimony of several things tonight, which was a little bit disturbing based on one central fact. The Rhode Island Constitution contains within its body a very simple statement. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That statement was written, obviously, centuries ago, based on the Rhode Island Charter that was given by the Crown. But the concept was that the average person, the typical person, is the person that you're not supposed to be afraid of. They are the person that is the foundation of your society. Of a couple of thousand people that were in those halls tonight, 99% of them are not people that you need to fear. If you asked virtually any of those people, what law would they back? They'll tell you in a minute. They'll back any law that focuses on the criminal. Now, of the things that I've heard tonight, one that was especially of concern to me was from one of the distinguished police officers that testified, concerned the red flag law. I understand the concept of that. If it passes judicial review and gets enacted, I imagine it will become law. But there was one inference there that concerned me. Well, how would I know, how could I find out if this guy had guns? Well, what we're talking about there is gun registration. That's how you would find out directly. Gun registration is specifically something that the NRA and the average gun owner would fight to the death to prevent, for the simple reason that it creates a succinct list which can be used for confiscation. This is well known. It's been done. It was done in Germany. It was done in Russia. It was done in China. It can be done by any government that chooses to do so. And our constitutions are designed to restrict government. It's not they tell us what we can do. We tell them what their authority is. And it's been pretty clear, both at the state level and the Rhode Island Constitution was used in the Heller case as evidence to back up the decision that the right to keep and bear arms is an individual right. Now, I can't speak for every firearm, but I can speak, I think, intelligibly on this magazine ban or magazine size issue. I am qualified with basically every firearm that has been used by the U.S. military since the late Civil War period through the present. As part of my competition, I'm expected to be able to deliver 10 rounds with a reloading of a rifle within 70 seconds. I could do that at 300 yards and a target about that big. Now, I can do that with an AR-15. I could do it with a bolt-action rifle. And while I couldn't guarantee the accuracy, I could probably do it with a single-shot falling block rifle. You are not going to gain safety by reducing magazine capacity. British soldiers in World War II were able to fire their bolt-action Lee Enfield rifles roughly as fast as we could fire our M1 Garand rifle, which was semi-automatic. So there is no gain other than psychological. If you give me two 10-round magazines, I will fire absolutely as fast as someone with a 20-round magazine. But the difference is if I am trained, I will do so very, very decisively. Now, there is the question about the AR-15 being some monstrously destructive assault rifle designed only for killing people. That little .223 caliber bullet that is used in the AR-15 is what used to be called a varmint cartridge, used for woodchucks, prairie dogs, and other small creatures. It does not generally do the damage to a human being that quite a few other choices do. and it gives a false sense of security. Now, sure, you could probably get by a law that could ban the AR-15. Maybe somebody could even do it nationally. And if you didn't produce a civil war as a result, what you would have done is eliminated the 99% of those rifles that are never going to be used to commit a crime. You would have either made felons of or penalized 99% of your population that own them. You would have taken billions of dollars in personal property, literally taken it, or made it impossible to sell legally if it were done on a national level. And what you would have gained is precisely nothing, because the 1% that is used in crime will never be surrendered. And for those wishing to make one, an AR-15 can be legally manufactured in your cellar with something as little as your router and a kit that you can buy that allows you to create the only part of it that is federally regulated. Okay? Now, this is by law. This exists already. They're called ghost guns, and as a matter of fact, they can be made on a great many firearms. You want to pass a law like that federally? Maybe that would help. But as it stands now, you are legally not protecting yourselves against anyone choosing to acquire a firearm for illegal use. Okay? You're not protecting yourself with the magazines. You're not protecting yourself with a gun design. I've heard so many people focus on the AR-15. There's got to be half a dozen or more firearms that do exactly the same thing or worse that you don't even know about. Okay? So if you want to protect children, by all means, protect them. Now, as a former teacher, I'm not advocating teachers running around with firearms on their hip, but a simple expedient called a biometric safe, a little box about like this that can be secured in a classroom, would allow a teacher who was suitably screened and licensed to carry to put a firearm in that safe, which is inaccessible to students. And if that awful last resort exists, where some wild man comes in the door of that classroom, that's what that gun is for, to protect the students in the worst case, last resort scenario. Should schools have armed security guards? I believe they should. Well-trained people, well-screened people. Now, there was a question raised about mental evaluation, psychological evaluation. That presumes, basically, that everybody that wants to buy a gun is somehow unbalanced enough to be a risk. I would offer you up a ridiculous retort to that. There are many people that say, well, liberalism is a mental disorder. It makes about as much sense as applying that to the people that are going to legally try to buy a firearm. Can you tighten up the mandatory purchase, mandatory checks? I hope so. I talked to a lovely lady who testified here who was concerned about gun shows. Well, gun shows are crawling with people with federal firearms licenses. In most cases, you couldn't get out the door with a gun unless you went through an FFL, the waiting period, the background check, and all that, and then received it from a federally firearm licensed person. So many of these things that people are pursuing as solutions are already covered under the law. In Florida, we witnessed a horrible combination, not only of police not acting locally, but a coalition between the police department and the school districts, which did not report criminality because it made things look better on the school records. As a result, no background check would reveal any problem with that deranged individual and perhaps a number of others. So the local police failed, the school department failed, the FBI failed, in part because nobody had the complete information. Now, you want to attack that. That's a real good thing to attack. Tighten up the whole concept of communication. If you can do it, and I hope you can, get HIPAA records released. I don't know if you can do that. I think the ACLU will be all over you. But if you can do it, it's fine with me. Okay? If you want to ban bump stocks, I fired a bump stock. It's a piece of junk. It's a toy. If you want to ban some kind of crank trigger that fires a semi-automatic rifle very rapidly, go ahead, ban it. But don't include in that rule, well, we can also decide anything else we want that might be worth banning. That's the difference. I think most of those people out there who've tried the bump stock and who realize how ridiculous it is would sign off, let you do it. Go ahead, get rid of it. But a clean bill, not something that has some little surprises built into it that could come back and haunt all of us later on. Okay? That's really all I have to say. But just please be aware that our Constitution is designed to protect us from government, and people in government have the responsibility to exercise that protection. If you're going to penalize and essentially create felons of 99% of the gun owners so that the 1% that are actually felons get loose, you haven't gained anything.